Hi guys, Aaron here with Ghost Raptor Gaming and Guns, and if you like lever action rifles, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button because today we have something very special for you. This is the Winchester 1894 in 30-30 Winchester. Now, what is my relationship with Winchester? I don't have a relationship with Winchester. They don't know I exist. They didn't send me this gun. This gun actually came from, originally a family friend had bought this about 30 years ago, and then later on sold it to my dad. So my dad owns this gun. It's on loan from him. No, I won't be customizing it in any way, so please don't ask. Now, if you are new to the channel, what I like to do on a review is I like to go through this gun front to back, top to bottom, and talk about the features and caveats of those features as I go. So we're going to start with the sights, but first things first, make sure it's clear, right? So the sights on this guy are pretty interesting. By the way, this is a 20-inch barrel model with a 7-shot tube, and again, it's chambered in 30-30. You can get them in a couple of different cartridges, and they're actually still produced today. This is a vintage one. I believe this might be a pre-64 model, but regardless, that's what you got. 20-inch barrel, 7-shot tube, 30-30 Winchester. Now, I'm going to insert some close-ups of the sights so you guys can really get a feel for them here. But what you have is a hooded front sight at the front. It is slightly ramped, and it's a pretty good front sight. The only thing I don't like about it is it's also a bead front sight. So instead of a traditional thin profile blade sight at the top, you have a rounded section. And while the sights are perfectly adequate, I did note that at extended ranges, that bead has a tendency to cover or obscure your target entirely. So I was shooting 4-inch size targets and 6-inch size targets at 100 yards with this thing, and the front bead sight covered it up entirely and made precise shots really difficult to take as a result of that. Now, I'm sure there's different models with different sights. Just for this particular model, I did note that that front bead sight kind of covers the target. Now, the rear sight is a pretty standard sight. It does click for elevation with a standard staged ramp, and then it actually has this really cool feature on it, which is a fine adjustment sight, which is to say it has a little bit of a metal leaf that you can loosen up with a couple screws and adjust it up or down to get really precise adjustments on this guy for any particular loading that you really like. So this one in particular really likes Remington core lock rounds. And so if you want to zero the gun specifically for that loading and just stock up and get hundreds of rounds for it, you have that fine adjustment, which will really allow you to zero it quite well for those loadings. Now, the sights are pretty good. Understand that they are adjustable for elevation, as I mentioned, but to adjust the rear sight for windage, you're going to need a hammer and a punch because it's drift adjustable and that's it. And you're not just going to be able to just press it, right? So you need either a specialty tool for that, or you need a hammer and a punch. And this gun has a tendency to shoot a little right. I'll probably adjust it later on, but as of right now, I'm leaving it as is. This stock is straight, and the receiver has a nice long tang there, as you can see. Now, these are walnut stocks. Typically, there are some other hardwoods out there for these guys, as there's always variations through the year, but typically they come with a walnut stock. It is smooth, has a very straight grip, and then of course there's really no recoil pad on this thing. It just has a plastic pad in the rear, possibly metallic depending on what yours is if you find one that you want to purchase. This one is checkered, and it has Winchester repeating arms stamped right into the rear of it. So that's kind of what you're looking at for your recoil pad. I'm sure you can get a rubber one for it if you want, but yeah, super cool. So, now that we've talked about that, let's talk about something interesting, the receiver. This receiver looks like this because it was made with what's called sintered steel. Now, most of the receivers were traditionally made out of a different type of steel, and they would take a nice rich blue to them very easily. But for whatever reason, with this so-called sintered steel, Winchester called it, it wouldn't hold its finish very well, and so the finish came right off on this gun very quickly. There's a whole batch of rifles that look like this as a result. But I think it's actually quite cool. It's almost like a stainless steel receiver, and I like that a lot. Now, the loading gate is here on the side. This is a tube feed rifle, and you will feed in your rounds one at a time into this tube right here. You have to depress it in and slide your rounds in, and just being those longer full-size rifle cartridges like 30-30 or like 32 Winchester Special, there's a couple other chamberings for this gun. What happens is you feed it in, and then the tube kind of wants to push the round back out, so you'll insert it almost all of the way. It'll push partially back out, and then you have a tendency to have to load in. To load the round in completely, you have to also load in your next round and partially feed that in, and it will push the first cartridge in all the way, and then your second cartridge or your next cartridge that you're loading will again protrude out of the loading gate a little bit, and when you're done, you kind of just have to stick your finger in there and push the round home and let it snap shut. So the loading process is a little difficult if you're not used to it, just because of those full-size rifle cartridges. It's a little difficult to load because like the tube wants to push the rounds back out when you insert them.
Yeah.
So you gotta like shove another round in behind it because like they want to pop out.
Oh yeah.
Like if I try to put another round in behind this, you'll see it like, see how it does that?
Yeah, so you have to like have another
So you
one
have
ready.
to like, you have to push it all the way in and then like shove it in with your pinky, and then the loading gate closes. It's definitely weird. At the top, we have a long, very long, thick extractor, which hopefully you can make out right there on the center of the bolt. It goes down quite a bit, and it is very, very reliable. Now, this is a top ejecting rifle, so it's tube fed, like I said, and then the rounds will load in from the bottom. They will load in on this elevator right there in the center, as you can see, and then as you close it, the bolt will come forward. It's a little difficult to do on camera. The bolt will come forward, pick the round up, push the elevator down, and lock the round into the chamber. And then when you fire this gun and you go to chamber your next round, you have to work the lever, which is down and forward, and then what will happen is the empty case will top eject and it will go up. And you do have to be careful because occasionally that brass may land in the back of your shirt and burn you. Believe me, it's happened to everybody I know who shot this rifle, and it's not a fun experience. And then to load your next round, simply close the lever by bringing it to the rear and up, and you chamber your next round. Now, the hammer on this guy also acts kind of like a safety. So, being a lever action gun with an exposed hammer, which is right here, you can cock the hammer when you're ready to shoot and then decock it to use it as kind of a safety. Furthermore, this thing also has a grip safety, kind of like a 1911, and I'll show you that in a minute. But I just want you to get a close-up idea of the hammer. Really good hammer, very easy to cock, very easy to decock. I like it quite a bit. The lever, this is a standard lever. It's not a big bow lever like you see John Wayne use, and you see on a lot of other Winchester rifles because, hey, these things are everywhere and they're iconic, right? But the lever is quite good. I can fit my entire hand into the lever if that's how you want to carry it. If not, it's not a big deal. You can carry it like this. You might want to do that as well. Totally up to you, right? But it is very smooth. Even with the hammer down, it's just, there's a little bit of a catch right in the middle, right about there, and then it goes all the way forward. That being said, even though the lever is slightly stagey, it is quite good. And just a pretty smooth action. Man, just listen to that, huh? I mean, that is just iconic, right? Lever action rifles are iconic in this country with good reason, and that's just one of them. So cool. Now, the grip safety is actually between the lever and the grip of the stock right here. And I'll see if I can get a good close-up of that for you. There's like a metal plunger right here at the bottom of the grip, and that interacts with the lever. So what happens is, when you close the lever, it will push it up. and you can see that the the trigger actually gets blocked when that's loose. There's a bit of a trigger block right behind the trigger, if you can see it there, that drops up and down. So when you're shooting this gun, you can't have a real loose grip, right? You actually have to be making sure you have a fairly firm grip, and you have to be squeezing that lever upwards in order to actually fire the gun. If you don't do that, as you can see here, the gun won't fire. So it is a very safe gun in that regards. There's no other manual safety on this thing. So you do have a grip safety, and then of course you can decock your hammer and the gun will never go off, right? Now, if you like this content so far, go ahead, like, share, subscribe, and do all that stuff. If you want to support the channel a little bit more, you can sign up for Patreon. It's $1 a month, link in the description. If you're not comfortable with the subscription service, there's of course a GoFundMe as well. Goal is currently $500. Do a one-time donation. I would really appreciate that. So let's talk about the trigger. So this is basically a single action gun, right? Because you have to have that hammer cocked. So the trigger is flat face, well, not flat face. It's slightly curved, and it is, what I meant is it's smooth, right? And it's not a bad trigger. No reset, by the way, because it's a lever gun. But it's not a bad trigger at all. It's actually kind of mil-spec. It almost reminds me of a mil-spec AR trigger. It's got to be right in at 6 pounds, maybe 6.5 pounds. It's actually a pretty decent trigger, and it is rather smooth. And there's like no take up on this guy either. You just hit a wall, right? Yeah, you just hit a wall with this guy, and then it breaks. And again, no reset because it is a lever action gun. Now, we're gonna get into, how about this? We'll do this real quick. How about disassembly, reassembly? How about, no, how about you don't do that? Open your lever, run a bore brush down there, lube all your parts up, close your lever, give the old test fire, and there you go. That's about all you're gonna do for maintenance. If you wanna disassemble this guy, you're gonna have a hard time, and you're not gonna have a good time, right? It's just very labor intensive to do that, so I wouldn't recommend that you do it. If you do wanna have that done, I would say go to a certified gunsmith and have him disassemble the gun, check everything out, replace anything that needs to be replaced, and then reassemble the gun for you, because you're just gonna hate the whole process, right? Now, what's the accuracy like on this gun? Well, because of that front bead sight, as I mentioned, for me, this gun was about a 3 MOA rifle, okay? Now, there's some inset footage that I'll be showing right now, but for me, it was a 3 MOA rifle, and 30-30 ballistically is about a 200-yard rifle. That's where most people say the performance really drops off, and you shouldn't use 30-30 past that. So really, I would say 200-yard maximum for this, and you can expect probably 6 or 7 inch groups at 200 yards. I wouldn't recommend it past 100, this particular model at least, just because that front sight really does obscure your target. Now, I think if you use really good loads, max loads or something like that, this one actually likes Remington core locked quite a bit. You could get that down to like a 2 MOA rifle. And then with an optic, obviously you could do better, but I think you're going to have a hard time finding optics, or optics mounts, I should say, to fit this rifle. It's going to be a little different than, say, your Marlin, which you can find a lot of good optics mounts for, right? So, about a 3 MOA rifle. That being said, what are the uses of this gun? I think really it's a deer gun, right? This is maybe a hog gun, medium-sized game. I think the 30-30 inside of 100 yards is going to serve you very, very well. However, could you use this gun for self-defense? You absolutely could. In fact, I want to say 5,000 or 6,000 of these rifles were actually used by Allied forces during the First World War, and a lot of those guys really liked them. It is a well-balanced, fairly light rifle, and a pretty powerful cartridge. And again, it has decent sights. Minute of man is no problem. And in fact, it was standard doctrine in a lot of militaries that used these rifles at the time to use their standard issue bolt-action rifles out to extended distances, and then when the enemy got within 150, 100 meters or so, really right on top of them, they would put those rifles down, pick up these Winchesters, and they would just lay waste to their enemies with these. And that was a very effective tactic. It proved very, very effective more than once during the war. So not only is this just a typical hunting rifle, but this is also kind of a military surplus rifle. So, hey, check that out. Now, as I mentioned, these come in different calibers. Obviously, 32 Winchester Special and a couple others, and the accuracy may vary based on those cartridges and their particular performance. But for 30-30, that's just kind of what I saw, right? Now, you could use the gun for self-defense. You could use it for hunting. You could do it for plinking or reenactments or something like that. Very, very cool gun. This has been Aaron with Ghost Raptor Gaming and Guns.